The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every single live Premier League game on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should have been an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Welcome along to the Football Show here on Off the Ball. Coming up in around half an hour's time, we'll be talking to Tim Vickery about the week in South American qualifying even. It's a week where Argentina booked their place at next year's World Cup in Qatar after a stormy enough derby with Brazil. We'll also be talking about Sergio Aguero potentially having to retire from the game, and Dani Alves returning to Europe with Barcelona at the ripe old age of 38. But we're also looking forward to the return of the Premier League this weekend, including the big game on Saturday night, Liverpool against Arsenal. Remarkably, Arsenal, for all their troubles early in the season, are now on the longest unbeaten streak in the Premier League. They've been unbeaten in their last 8, winning 6 and drawing 2. Delighted to say we're joined by former Arsenal midfielder, now broadcaster, and probably known to many of our younger listeners as a voice of FIFA 22, Stewart Robson. Stewart, how are you getting on?
Very good, thank you. And you?
Yeah, good. It's nice to talk about Arsenal in a positive slant. You know, the last few years, particularly since the end of the Wenger era, in many cases it's been talking about Arsenal in crisis, but over the last couple of months, really since the international window at the start of September, there's been a big upturn in Arsenal's form.
There certainly has. They're playing with more confidence at the moment. They're defending better all over the pitch. They've got some pace in the front areas. I think he's come to the right system in terms of playing Aubameyang up front and Lacazette in behind. Then they've got Saka one side and Smith-Rowe on the other side. And those players are great counter-attacking players, and I think it's worked for Arsenal. I still think they have a problem in that central midfield area, and they could have a problem against Liverpool. But Arsenal are playing so much better. And I think the right back that's come in has done an exceptional job. I saw him last season playing in Serie A, and he's done a really good job at right back. Good defensively, and he'll also get forward.
Given those changes that have been made by Mikel Arteta over the last couple of months, was it just a case of persevering and having a bit of patience with the way he's trying to change this style and the way that Arsenal are going to play? Or what's the reason for the difference that we've seen?
I hope I'm wrong, but I think he's just stumbled across a formation and a system and a set of players that has worked for him, because we've had little spells at Arsenal where they've looked a good side. When they won the FA Cup, you thought, well, this is the way they're going to go. They were playing 3 at the back at the time. There was great movement between the left-sided front player and the left-sided the left wing-back. We saw good rotation in midfield, and we thought this was the making of Arsenal. And then when it started to go wrong after 2 or 3 games, he changed the system, changed the personnel. And that's what young managers quite often do. When they have a couple of poor results, they look for something else. They want to have a quick remedy. Sometimes it's sticking with what you've got and making yourself better at that thing. And hopefully that's what Arteta will do over the coming weeks. Even if they get a poor result over the next 2 or 3 weeks, he sticks with what they've done over the last 8 weeks.
Yeah, because look, it's an intimidating game to play against a Liverpool team who are so good, particularly so good at Anfield again after the kind of miserable run they had the side of the end of the last calendar year. They're back being really difficult to beat at home again, and the return of crowds probably has a lot to do with that too. But for Arsenal, like some of the young guns coming through, we saw Emile Smith-Rowe get some caps internationally during this window just gone by. Bukayo Saka seems to have gone from strength to strength. That's probably the excitement at the Emirates currently, that there are these players now coming through at the club.
Well, they're the 2 players that are exciting everybody, because Saka had a great season last year, had the World Cup where he started in the England team and then got left out and obviously missed the penalty, which was a sad thing for him. But he's come back stronger this season. And Smith-Rowe, we saw him 2 or 3 years ago playing in Europa League matches, and he was outstanding. And you can have passing football. Passing football will get you, a lot of reward if you do it very well. But you also need players that can run with the ball, that can break into space, that can counter-attack at pace with the ball. And that's what Smith-Rowe gives Arsenal. That's what Saka gives Arsenal. And Pepe, for all his attributes, wasn't really giving that to Arsenal when he wasn't playing at his best.
Yeah, and it's probably about finding that bit of grit around the centre midfield. You said at the outset, that's probably the one question mark over the team currently, and a lot of players have been trialled in the centre midfield. But Thomas Partey, how important has he become now?
He's an important player. I saw a lot of him at Atletico Madrid, where he looked as though he was a top-class player. He could defend well. He's courageous. He's aggressive at times. He can also play. And that's what you want as a central midfield player. They have to be athletic these days. You can't just be a good passer of the ball, or you can't just be a good defensive player. Yeah, I think you have to have all the attributes. And Partey has got most of the attributes needed to be a top-class player. who plays alongside him, that's the difficult question for Arteta.
Yeah, a goalkeeper position too with Ramsdale coming in. Like, eyebrows kind of went up a little bit. Emiliano Martinez, who was a very good player, went to Aston Villa and has flourished. Bernd Leno was then installed as the number one, and then Arsenal went out and bought Ramsdale, who had gone out and had a difficult season last year. But some of his performances since he's come in so far, particularly that Leicester City game, was a remarkable performance from him.
Outstanding. He looks a top-class goalkeeper at the moment. Since he's been at Arsenal, I don't think he's made too many errors. He's made some fantastic saves. He looks very confident. And I think that's been transmitted to the centre-backs as well. Suddenly Gabriel and White look a decent combination. That wasn't the case at the beginning of the season. And I say the right-back has done well since he's been in. And it's a case of who plays at left-back as well. Both players have done very well. Tierney has done a great job going forward and bursting forward, even when Arsenal weren't playing well. And so is the player that's come in to replace him at times. Yeah,
White built his reputation with Brighton and Hove Albion, and look, he looked a very impressive player before Arsenal signed him. Not ideal the way his season started, and he was out for a while and then coming into the side. He seems to have found his feet though in recent games.
Yes, I mean, when you pay that sort of money for a centre-back and you look at the other centre-backs Arsenal had, he's got to be the leader. He's got to come to the fore straight away. You can't sort of say, well, in 2 or 3 years' time he'll be a good player. He has to come and play well for Arsenal now. He has to be the leader. He has to be dominant. He has to be good in the air. He has to be a strong tackler. And he also needs to be good on the ball. I think he's got a couple of those attributes. I would still question whether physically he's been strong enough, particularly at the start of the season. I think he's a good player. He should get better, but he needs to be a dominant centre-half at the moment.
Arsenal have been okay on the road, Stewart, with the way they've played, particularly with clean sheets, which they've kept. 6 clean sheets kept in their last 9 games away from home in the Premier League. I appreciate that Liverpool is probably a step up on some of the teams that they've played recently, but that kind of defensive solidity will be really required if they're to get a result against Liverpool.
Yeah, and it depends, again, what Arsenal turn up. We say how well they've played over the last 8 weeks. I was at the game against Crystal Palace where they were totally outplayed by Crystal Palace, who passed round them. It was far too easy for Crystal Palace to play. Arsenal can't have a performance like that, although they got a draw in the end. If they're that loose, if they're that spread out, Liverpool will punish them. So Arteta's got to make sure the defending's good all over the pitch. But he's also got to look back at Liverpool's game against Brighton and not make the same mistakes. Brighton tried to play out from the back early on, kept having the ball taken off them. Liverpool went 2 up and looked as though they were going to destroy Brighton. But once Brighton played beyond that pressure and they got it into their place just behind Liverpool's midfield, they could have gone on and won the game. It was an excellent performance. And Arteta's got to get the right formation and the right tactics to break down Liverpool.
Yeah, and you got to go with a bit of invention when you go to Anfield. Saw Crystal Palace create plenty of chances and unlucky not to take something out of their game at Anfield not that long ago, and the Brighton game particularly. In that second half they went out with a positive approach even after they went behind in the game. That's something Arsenal will have to carry on the counter-attack. There's going to have to be something that's going to trouble Liverpool if they're going to have any chance of taking something from the game, because we've seen Liverpool dominate sides so far this year. They've looked not too far off their 2019-2020 level again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The question mark for Arteta will be Saka and Smith-Rowe. What does he tell them defensively? Does he want them going all the way back with Alexander-Arnold? Does he want him going all the way back with Robertson? Or do they play in a half cheating position so that when Arsenal win the ball back, they're in space so they can counter-attack quickly? That's what they've done very well this season. I think it's got to be a bit of both. Early on in the game, they're going to have to do the defensive side of the game, but they've got to switch on. As soon as Arsenal win the ball back, they've got to get themselves into positions where they're ready to counter-attack, and they've got to be the first option for midfield players or defenders winning the ball. And if those two players get on the ball with space in front of them, we've seen that Liverpool, in those Brighton games, in that Crystal Palace game, they aren't quite so good defensively. Their good defensive play comes from their pressing from the front, their pressing in midfield. And remember, I don't think they're going to have 2 or 3 of their best midfield players playing Liverpool.
Yeah, and that's an area where they can be definitely got it, and that's been the case over the last year or so, where they've had multiple midfield players out and their defensive players around about this time of the year as well. The point on Trent Alexander-Arnold is an interesting one, Stuart, given he offers so much to Liverpool overlapping on that right-hand side, and he's been a chance-creating machine in the opposition half this year. But sometimes teams know that if Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold are pushed up high, Liverpool can be vulnerable down that right-hand side. It's not an individual fault issue, but clearly there is space when those two players go forward at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think that's where Aubameyang, if he's fit to play, that's where he comes in, because it may be that Saka, or whoever plays out on the left-hand side, Smith-Rowe, will have to go back with Alexander-Arnold and stop him crossing the ball. But then Aubameyang, from his centre-forward position, can then go that little bit wider, again, to use that space that Alexander-Arnold has left, and then get down the side of the right-sided centre-back, whoever that may be for Liverpool. So Aubameyang's got to play the game wisely, and I think he does well come in from that inside left position, just as Thierry Henry did all those years ago for Arsenal.
That's been the key for Arsenal from an attacking point of view, is getting these best attacking players all onto the pitch at the same time. And that was a bit of a conundrum for Arteta to work out, because there was a brief period where you kind of had Lacazette playing slightly behind Aubameyang and he was about stretching the play, and then Aubameyang goes slightly over and has maybe found a new lease of life playing over from the left hand side, almost in what I would probably call the Thierry Henry position.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I just wonder about what's been going on at Arsenal for the last year or so with Arteta, because it looked as though Lacazette was out of favour and looked as though he was going to leave the club. It looked as though Aubameyang was unhappy playing on the left wing, and then he went to centre forward, and then he was left out the team. And it looked as though some of these players were going to be let go. And suddenly they've come to the fore for whatever reason, whether the tactics are right, whether Arteta's now managed them better, whether the players have got together and said, come on, let's give it a good go. You know, we're here for a couple of years. We've got to make the best of it, like Aubameyang and Lacazette. And suddenly they look like players full of confidence. They look half a yard quicker, both in their feet and in their brain. And Arsenal look a good side at the moment. But this is going to be a massive game for both clubs, I think, because if Liverpool lose, and Arsenal win, Arsenal go above them, and Liverpool are out the top four. So it seems a long way away from Chelsea. And if Arsenal lose, everybody say, well, there we are. Arsenal aren't that great. So massive game for both teams. Yeah,
definitely. And like for Liverpool this year, Stuart, how impressed have you been with Mo Salah? Like Jurgen Klopp, who even tries to spread the praise around, even a few times this year he's been asked, is Mo Salah the best player in the world right now? And he said yes. Like Salah has put in some incredible performances in this first couple of months of the season.
Absolutely. This is the best that Mo Salah's played. I mean, he's been a great player for Liverpool over the last 3 years or so. He looks as though he can score goals. He looks sharp again. He looks bright. He looks determined. His movement off the ball is fantastic. And it's going to be a tough job for Arsenal to contain him. And it's so difficult to contain because he doesn't play on the right wing. He plays somewhere in between the right wing and the right-sided centre-forward. So there's always that balance. Who picks him up? A centre-half that comes out and deals with him? A full-back, does he stay and follow his runs? That's what's so clever about Liverpool and their front three, the movement of those front three. Very difficult for a back four to pick them up at times.
Yeah, it's a different challenge when it's Diogo Jota playing as opposed to Roberto Firmino. They've been unlucky, Liverpool, with the injuries to Firmino so far this year. But it would seem that the nucleus of that front three are now coming back to form. Like Mo Salah has been so good. Mane on the other side, he's fluffed a few chances this season, but he gets into such good positions that generally he will find himself in a position to score a goal at some point during the game.
And a lot of it comes down, not just to those three players, it all comes down to Liverpool's midfield players winning the ball back. And when they're playing at home in front of a fervent crowd, I think they get away with a lot of what I would say dubious tackles that are allowed to go on, and Liverpool win the ball back. And as soon as they win the ball back, then you see Mane making his forward run, you see Salah making his forward run, and Jota when he's playing. And I think there's talk that Mane might not be fit to play. He got a slight injury while he was away. So it could be that Jota plays on the left-hand side and Firmino plays through the middle.
It'll be intriguing to see what the team lineup is like at around about 4:30 on Saturday afternoon. I mentioned at the outset, Stuart, for a lot of younger listeners and those who play FIFA, your voice will now become very synonymous listening to yourself and Derek Gray doing the commentary. Have you enjoyed probably the bit of extra attention or maybe new fans that you've possibly picked up by being a voice of FIFA 22?
I've got to say, I know nothing about what anybody's saying. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on social media. I've got a son who plays it, but he's not going to give me any praise, and he knows me already. So it hasn't changed my world one little bit at the moment. I'm sure it will at some point, but at the moment, I don't know anybody that plays it, so apart from my son, so it hasn't really changed me.
Well, he's probably the toughest audience of all. He'll probably give you more truth than people who be on social media.
And he's not a youngster. He's 30 odd, 33, I think now.
FIFA 22 available to all ages, of course. Like, we were kind of chatting in the office earlier about what the process must be like. Do you just go into a sound booth on your own and just reel off 100 lines in an afternoon for them?
Let me tell you, it's the toughest thing that I have ever done in terms of the media. I wrote most of the lines myself, so that there's hundreds and hundreds of scripts or scenarios that I have to write the words to, and then I would go in and do a 5-hour session. I did 41 5-hour sessions in a studio by myself, and with a sound technician somewhere else in the world and a producer somewhere else in the world. So it was quite a in the end, quite a performance to do it.
Yeah, and a performance is what it is, because it's very difficult to recreate that match feeling when you're not actually sitting on a broadcast getting ready for a game. That's you having to give that kind of energy that you would give to a match experience while sitting in a sound booth. Yeah.
And what you have to realise is I'm not allowed to talk about any team, so I'm doing everything sort of, what's the right word, general, generic. I can't see any action. I'm just there's just 4 blank walls and a microphone. So I'm just having to put the energy in and trying to get the right tone, which is not easy. Hopefully I did an okay job.
Yeah, I think they've done a remarkable job. You and Derek flow entirely when you listen to the commentary on the game. And Stewart, thanks a million for joining us this evening on Off the Ball. We'll be back in a moment. We'll be talking to Tim Vickery about South American football.